Hello and welcome to our What's New session in SAP Datasphere. My name is Klaus-Peter Sauer, and together with my colleagues on the product management team, we will be updating you on the latest features and functions we delivered in Q2 this year. Looking at the agenda, we will be covering updates in all areas of the product. So starting with features in data modeling and data integration, but also other components of SAP Datasphere. At the end, like always, I will give you an outlook on what we plan to deliver in Q3 and the next couple of quarters. So let's get started with new features in the data modeling area. So over to my colleagues, Jan and Abdul.
So let's look at this in the model. So I prepared a base model that we'll be using in stacking. So let's inspect that one. So this is a normal analytic model. It's built on a single fact, this one here. And this one brings a couple of own attributes and a couple of associated dimensions. Possibly we quickly inspect that. So it's very classic normal fact view, and it has a couple of associations. So we see there's 5 associations here at play and 1 input parameter. And based on that, we built a couple of additional measures. So we got value and quantity from the underlying fact. We built a price, we built a currency conversion of that price for some target currency for which we have a variable. We have currency conversion as well for the value itself. And then 2 restricted measures, one hard coding a product ID for one certain product that happens to be on the cloud. And then we collect another reference product as a variable and sort of build a restricted measure on those. We choose to, out of those 5 dimensions, we choose to expose exactly those. So product, opportunity, and controlling area. But for example, we are not exposing others. So there was a sending cost center and receiving cost center. So that analytic model says, I don't need those. They happen to be brought by the fact, but I'm not interested. So this is now our base analytic model. It happens to have a couple of variables. So one is directly linked to the input parameter. So the fact view down here is filtering on that controlling area that we provide. It's defaulted to controlling area 1. We have a target currency that we collect, and that is being used in the currency conversion. And then we have a reference product that itself is a restrict measure variable. It may contain various values. It's not mandatory. So based on that, we are now creating a new model. So that's going to be interesting. So now we're coming to the whole point of this. So we build a new analytic model. And as we had it on the slide, now other analytic models can be used, not only facts. So they are totally provided here. So I can totally now take the base model that we just inspected and use it as if it was a fact. And it really behaves in all its respects totally like a fact would do. So it provides measures, it provides attributes, it provides associated dimensions, it provides variables or input parameters. So the importing dialog is actually 100% as we know it, or from the fact. There are tiny changes, and we'll see that. So let us be really minimalistic. So we're not interested in the analytic model attributes. We take over all the measures, and let's not choose the product ID for reasons we'll come to. All the variables we take over. Currently, we can only take them over, and we'll come to that in the restrictions. Midterm, you can will also be able to hard code them or derive them. So far, we just inherit them, so they become variables of that upper analytic model. And so where are we now? So we now have a analytic model that is using itself analytic model as base, and the formulas or the measures that we that the lower level is giving us, they are landing as fact source measures. And this might seem subtle or small, but this is very important. So however the low model chooses to define something, we just accept it. And this is exactly actually what we're doing with normal facts as well. So when a view gives us a measure, we don't know how it was calculated, how it was, what calculation means was applied earlier or lower on. We just take it. And here we're following the same approach. And this is true whatever the character of that. It's a calculated measure, a restricted measure, a currency conversion measure, and so on. All variable types. So we chose to take those two dimensions, and we continue to have those two variables. So let's see how this now behaves at runtime. So when we preview this. So totally expected, we are prompted for 3 values. So we want to see this in Indian rupees, and we take a reference product that we later will be filtering upon in our restricted measures. And so that's that reference product here. And now, very expected as well, my values show up. But note one thing. So there is the value of the product HANA Cloud, but when I check on what dimensions are around for me for drilling, its product is not one of them. So there's something subtle happening here from the system standpoint, and that is that the lower analytic model chose to have a dependency on here, the product, but how it does it internally, that's totally opaque to us when it's not exposed. So this lower model can fully use the product, and so can the upper, but the user cannot. And that's sort of the trick from a deployment and handling standpoint, that the upper model is sort of shielded from the requirements and the exact way the low model works. It just sees dimensions, it just sees measures. How the low model does it, it's up to it. So let's jump back. And now we can take those measures and build something new. And this is also as we had it with facts. So I can totally take a measure and say, what if now I take so the value percentage here. So what is my reference product as compared to, so what percentage does it make to that value? So that's a calculations. So that's a value percent of ref product within value. So I can totally, as if it was a measure, say, oh, this is what I want to calculate. And so I validate that, and this would just work. So this is now something that builds on top of what I inherited, and so on. So let's take that and save and deploy it. So that is my what's new. So that's a general point that I want to drive home, and that is that the stacked analytic model can do whatever as if it was a fact that it's using. It's just how it, and so it can make use of the measures and do whatever with them in its own calculation. It can take its dimension that are offered to it and pick and choose from those, and only from those. So the lower model chose to offer out of those 6. It chose to offer only those 3. And so those 3 are visible, the others are not. And it also had certain variables. There's something subtle about the variables here, and that is that those, each one, are used in certain respects. And so this reference product here is something that the restrict measure uses. So what if I no longer wanted this, and I didn't wanted this either, then there wouldn't really be a need to prompt anyone for that reference product, because there's no user up here that forces me to do so. And this is actually what's happening, that now the variables, there are only two of those now. And the same is true here for the price in target currency and the value in target currency. If there's no currency conversion happening, why should anyone be prompted here? And for that reason, we introduce something that we call active and inactive variables. And so that analytic model actually has 3 variables, but in the consumption analytic model on top, there's really only one in use, and the other ones are inactive because they're not used. And so this handling of inside dependencies, this is really where the magic is and all of this stacking thing. And so pointing this out, so let me throw these changes away. And so I discard those and do something that is also interesting, and that is I create something on the lower level. So I'm back on the lower model now. And the benefit of inheriting is that whatever the lower level gives you, it's provided further up. So I could do, for example, a VAT value added tax of value. So in Germany, we use, hello. So in Germany, we have 90% for value added tax. So let's use that. And now there's one more measure to be had here. So if I now save this, I updated the definition of the lower model. And by updating the definition of the lower model, the upper model can totally make use of that. So if now I'm refreshing my upper model, it could make use of that new measure. So when I check in here, there's now a new measure that I can use. And the same is true for any of the changes that I could do here. So when I choose that the value in target currency here, if that guy no longer uses this reference date or this exchange type, but some other, so be it. That's the character of inheritance, that when this guy updates it, then it's updating itself. And then what is also interesting is that the lower model is totally aware of its usages. So this was a graceful change, but I'm still being made aware. But what could also happen is that so what I could alternatively do is that I literally took something out. So if the upper model is using the price, but the price is no longer part of my lower model, so this guy is aware. So it has been modified, and so I'm potentially breaking those upper models. So let's imagine I save this. So I really want to be sure I do this. And B, the system is aware of what the character of the change of that model is. So when I now refresh this guy, the state of that model is obviously affected by the state of its inheritance source. And so when this guy is expecting a price, but there's no price to be had anywhere, then it really has an issue. So it says I want to have a price, but I can't have it. So I need to go to that measure. I need to sort of, what is my source field here? So and so I'm really now in a design time error state. And sort of also this change management is subtly handled here. So let us go back and introduce this back again. So it's value over quantity. So if I validate that and deploy that, then things should be totally good again. And what is also noteworthy is that this object, because it's now being consumed, is aware of other object that it's in lineage with. And so these here are known, and this is how actually the change management works of the whole lot. So when I refresh this here, so now the errors should go away, and the status is as expected. It's now by virtue of refresh, it's reading this updated metadata, but there are changes to deploy because the definition, so the price is back in as before, but now the definition of that value in target currency, in order to make this available at runtime, I need to take that updated definition. And this is why I need to redeploy this updated metadata that it just inherited. And by updating it, by deploying it, this is now available. So now this is deploying. What is also interesting is that there is lineage, and we had that on the slides potentially. So this guy here is aware of its usage up here, and we can potentially stack to arbitrary levels. So this is what I did ahead of time to prepare for this demo here, that there's a first level and there's totally a second and third level. And so that is totally available to me as well, that each level does something and builds on top.
I have a view here called view as flight, and this is an important feature that is part of the view builder here. Earlier we had a workaround to look at the performance of a view via HANA Explorer, but now we have brought this into the view builder's capability, and this is for the modeler persona. The earlier one was for the admin persona. Now you can notice that we have a runtime metrics icon here. I can bring that up. So this shows that this hasn't run a performance analysis prior to this. So I can go ahead and run this. It gives me a message that I am starting the performance analysis for this particular view. And we run a couple of queries in order to measure the duration and peak memory. One is select star from view, limit to 1000, and another is select count star from view. And I could go ahead and run this again. And when I run that, notice that it compares it with the previous run and gives you the delta, whether it improved or it got worse from the earlier run, right? So notice that this has a couple of runs with the timestamp of when it ran. Number of rows gives you how the data access is, whether it's persisted or it's virtual. It shows you if there are any adapters with limited capabilities in the view. You can generate an explain plan and also download it to the local file system if you prefer as a CSV. And you can also go to view analyzer here. When I refresh this, I should see that the analysis of the view is completed, and I will get the details about that analysis, right? If I go back to the data builder, notice a couple of things. One is that when you run the view, you can also possibly cancel that if it's taking too long. And also, if you go to the lineage of this particular view, you might have a very complex view which is dependent on other views. You have the run metrics icon on each of the views here as well, so that you can go one by one into each of the views and run the metrics for that particular view. I have an analytic model here called measure dependencies. Let me navigate to one of the measures within this analytic model. And on the top right here, you might have noticed that there's a measure dependency icon which launches the measure dependency graph. I can center based on another measure as well from where I have launched this. I can just click any of the measures and it shows me a context pad, and I can just click this measure dependencies icon. So it'll repaint it with the dependencies of that. You can turn off the dependencies and maybe look at only the impact or vice versa. I can navigate to any of the other measures, look at the properties by clicking on the info bar. I could search for something as well, like an umbrella measure here, right? I could also switch from bottom to top representation to left to right. And I can also enable the attributes and variables to be depicted on the graph. So notice that it is color coded with purple color for attributes and black color for measures. And also there are icons, so you can see like a fan icon for attributes and flower braces for variables as well here. And lastly, I can go to any of the measures here and choose this icon where it takes me to that particular measure in the analytic model. And if I go back, I was looking at the umbrella measure here. The info bar here shows the same information as what was shown on the dependency graph, the same set of properties. Let's look at the simple analytic model. Navigate to measures. I choose quantity. And when I scroll down, I see a formatting section. I can choose the scale to be default 1000, million, billion, or percent. And I can choose the decimal places to be 0 through 9. If I inspect the percent quantity, I see that I've defined an expression as quantity over grand total of quantity. Let me now define a new calculated measure, call it formatted value. I'll use value as the expression. And I'm going to set the scale here as a million and the decimal places to be 3. I'm now ready to preview the model. Let's choose the controlling area dimension so that I can see the relevant measures for controlling area 1 and 2. Now let me consume this in SAC. I'll quickly hop over to SAC here. To save time, I've already created a story in SAC with a couple of charts. And here we can see that the value, as we saw in Datasphere in the model preview, is as is. And in the styling, I have retained the formatting of the value. The number formats are the default. And as formatted value, I'm coming in to this particular chart. And here, I'm going to change this scale. We can override that. I can change it to 1000 and the scale format. I can make it below. Right? So that's how you can consume those formatted measures here in SAC. I'll start with an analytic model. Let me go to the variable definitions and add a filter variable. I'm choosing the item ID as a dimension, and let me change the filter type. You can see these different options in the filter type. I'm choosing a range. First, I'll choose a particular interval. I'll choose item IDs between those ending in 107 and 111. And as I wanted to add multiple range values, let me add one more here. as something greater than item ID ending in 187. I want to save and deploy this. It's been deployed. Now let me go to the model preview here. Notice that we have 8 items here on the model preview. If I come back to the analytic model here, I wanted to show you the consumption via OData API. So I am able to launch this URL. But before I do that, I want to show you that when I change any of the set values from the defaults on the model properties, here my URL adjusts accordingly. So now let me go to this URL. I have a JSON editor extension installed, so you can see this represented nicely. And over here, if I collapse the value, I can see that it has 8 items, exactly what we had in the earlier model preview.
Thank you, Abdul. And the next topic is on the BW side with the data product generator. Over to Sandy.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to the data product generator for SAP Business Data Cloud today. Basically, what it does and what it is about the BW modernization story that we're having. So here we're enabling customers to push BW data into Datasphere, which is part of Business Data Cloud. And that allows you or the customers in this regard to create BW data products on top of their BW data. And here you would also see the supported entities. So we're not only supporting BW4 entities and objects, but also the ones coming from BW NetWeaver, such as InfoCubes, multi-provider. And below, you will also see the version requirement for this data product generator. So we do have some limitation regards to BW 7.5. So if customers are on 7.4, they need to upgrade to 7.5 first. For BW 400 2021, we need a minimum support package of 4. And for BW 2023, we have no requirements here. And maybe also some important information for BW 7.5 NetWeaver. Here, you would also need a HANA database. And please note that this data product generator, as of today, is only available if customers have their BW private cloud edition with Business Data Cloud, right? So they would need to create this kind of service. They would need to use some capacity units to get this BW provisioned, and then you will be able to use this data product generator. And basically the benefit of it, first of all, you are able to store the data that you're having from BW within the object store of Datasphere, which is way more cost efficient than with HANA Cloud. And the other part is that you can create those BW data products. You can share them with Databricks. And as you can see, this is not available yet. So this is planned for wave 14. And with the overall, let's say, overarching goal of Business Data Cloud, you will also be able to leverage those BW data products within Datasphere, which is targeted for H2 2025. Right. So now that was a little bit more of a theory. Let me jump into the system to show you how it works. So here I just have a simple ADSO, which has this kind of technical name here. You would also be seeing some data. So we have here 50 records. That's just a regular ADSO. So the next step or the next thing you're going to do is to jump into your cockpit if you have a BW4 system. If it's going to be a BW NetWeaver system, you would need to jump to SAP GUI instead. So here, if it's enabled, you're going to have another tab which states Data Product Generator. Once you click on that, did that here already, you will be able to see so-called subscriptions. So the idea of subscriptions, as you may know or not, is that you're going to create one and select a certain source object. So here I'm selecting the ADSO that I've just shown to you. The technical name will automatically be created. You can also define some settings here. So you can define, do I want to load or push the data to the object store in a full, in a delta manner? That's something that you can decide here. You can also put in a process chain variant if you would like, and then you need to set the status to active as well. Then we've got here some projections. So in case you wouldn't like to have all the columns that are listed here, you can also exclude them. And the best part here is the local table file, which is basically the local table that you're creating on Datasphere side. So that's something that's going to be triggered when you create the so-called subscription. And the biggest benefit here is actually that you can directly jump from your subscription within the BW4 cockpit to your Datasphere local table file. So what I'm expecting here is that there will be a local table file created that is stored in the object store of Datasphere, which contains the data from my ADSO. So I've got here the columns, for instance, and then below here, if I preview the data, I would also see the 50 records that I would have seen in the modeling tools. Okay, so that is basically the, let's say, the functionality that the data product generator enables you to do. You get the data from any entity that I've listed before into the object store of Datasphere, and then the next step would be is to create your data product out of it. So before I do that, the prerequisite here is I would require to have a data provider profile, and then afterwards I can just, here I've already created that one. So basically you create a data product here. You would need to put in some context, some categories, and then at the end of it, you're going to, let me double check here. When I scroll down here, you will be able to add the artifacts that you would like to expose as data product. So here you would see the same technical name of this ADSO that I've just, or not just now, but I created before. And then you're being able to use this data product and browse it in the catalog. So that is, let's say, the goal of the workflow and how it's going to be in the future. But please note that BW data products as of today, even if the data product generator is available, unfortunately, you cannot share it with Databricks, as I've mentioned. So you still need to wait for at least wave 14 to do so. And the installing of those BW products will also be tackled in H2 2025. So this is rather a theoretical demo of how you would proceed. And the next step would be simply to look for your data product in here. So just type in sales orders, and then you would find here the BW one, that would be this one here. This is how it looks like. So you see here, if you scroll down below, this is the local table file. And now if the functionality would have been available, you would see here a install and share button. Right, but as I've mentioned, it's not available as of today. Right, that would be it from my side.
Thank you, Sandy. And over to topics in the data integration and monitoring area to Mustafa, Venkat, and Amok.
Hello, I would like to show you another new improvement around the task chain area, which is the improvement to the retry mechanism of the task chain. With that improvement, the task chain does a deep retry and propagates the retry down to all its nested chains down to retry the point of failure instead of the old behavior which used to initiate a new run for the whole faulty nested chain. So like you see here in that example, rather than retrying the whole nested chain level 1, for example, we would directly propagate the retry and just initiate a retry down to the point of failure, which is the failing view here. I'd like to show you that quickly in demo. So let me jump to the chain editor, and you can see here that I had already created a task chain, and looking here at the lineage of it, we can see that it is here we have the main chain, which has a nested chain level 1, and that one has another chain nested level 2, which contains a failing or a faulty view deep nested in the chain here. And what I'm going to do now is to initiate a retry, and I'm going just as well to show you that the data integration monitor of that chain that I have been showing you, that's the top level chain, the deep retry demo, and in it we have the nested chains like I had mentioned before. Here is the level 1. The level 1 contains a remote table replication and a nested chain level 2, and the nested chain level 2 as well contains now our failing view. And the aim here is to propagate the retry directly to the point of failure and not to retry any of the completed tasks along the way. So I'm going to navigate back to the top level task chain, and here I am going to retry the latest run. And like you notice here, immediately it put the task chain level, the nested chain to running back instead of being failed. And the nested chain level 1 would as well now propagate the retry to the nested level 2, and here as well going to the point of failure directly. We see now the failing view. It had already failed once before here, and now we are running it again for the second time without having the need to reinitiate again the full chain, including the completed ones. Now I am going to refresh the page here, and we can see that our failing view had already completed. It failed before because it had an error, but in the meantime I had edited the view and corrected the error, and when I retry it now it completes again, and we can see here that is the history for every time it had been running. So now I can navigate back to the parent, and you can see as well that now we have the task chain level 2 completed, which was the chain containing the faulty view, and now as well our nested view as well had been completed. So that is actually the improvement about the new retry mechanism, and that would actually conclude my demo. So thank you for your attention.
Microsoft SQL Server as a source in the replication flow. We have extended the capabilities of the Microsoft SQL Server connection type. This connection type was previously supported for remote tables and data flows, now extended the support for replication flows. This will allow you to replicate the data directly from Microsoft SQL Server databases. With this extended functionality, now you can use Microsoft SQL Server databases as sources to replicate the data using the replication flow. You can perform initial only and initial and delta load types with SQL Server as a source. However, there are few limitations that you should be aware of. Views, synonyms, and the tables without primary keys are not supported. If you add the tables without primary keys or views or synonyms for the replication in the replication flow, those will not be added out. Instead, you will see an error message. The business value of supporting the replication flows for the Microsoft SQL Server is significant. Now you can replicate the data from all supported Microsoft SQL Server versions. by adding the support for the replication flow. This enhances the overall integration with Microsoft SQL Server databases. This is a quick flow on how to use SQL Server as a source and replication flow. Now, if you look at when you create a connection to the SQL Server, the replication flows is enabled. So, meaning that now you should be able to use SQL Server as a source for the replication flows. When you create a replication flows, you can select the source connection, which is Microsoft SQL Server, and you need to select the container. So it will list out all the schemas within the SQL Server, and you can select the container in which the database source objects that you want to replicate. And then you can select the source objects. In this case, in the screenshot, I'm selecting three tables to add it to the replication flow. One without the primary key, just to show you that this is not supported without primary key. When you add these tables to the replication flow, it will error out saying that the table without a primary key is not supported, and it will not be added to the replication flow. This is a typical flow for creating a replication flow with SQL Server as a source. Let me jump into the UI to show you how you can create a replication flow for Microsoft SQL Server as a source. Let me jump into the space. Let me create a new replication flow. Select a source connection. So now I can select, I have two different Microsoft SQL servers. So I'll select the one I'm using for this demo. When you select the source connection, you can select the source container where you want to select the source objects. In this case, I want to use the schema DBO within the SQL server. Then you can add the source objects. So within the source objects, I want to add three tables, one without the primary key, one for the initial load, and one for the initial and delta. Yeah, when I add these tables, the one without primary key, it will error out because this is not supported. So when I add these tables to the replication flow, I will see an error. You will see an error for the table that does not have a primary key because this is not supported. So the remaining two tables will be added, and you can change the load types, one for the initial load and one for the initial and delta. Then select your target connection. In this case, I'm going to select Datasphere as my target. I'm not going to save this or run this because I already created a replication flow for this demo with the same tables. This is the one that I already created, and I already executed this replication flow. Let's see from the monitoring, data integration monitoring. Yeah, you can see the two tables. The initial is already done, completed. And the next table, which I configured for the initial and delta. So it is currently retrying for any delta records.
Connection type SFTP as replication flow target. SAP Datasphere supports generic SFTP connection to access files on SFTP server. Initially, this connection was supported for data flows, where you could use the connection to bring in the source objects, integrate and transform the data. Now we have extended the support to the replication flows, where you can use this connection as target and replication flows to load the data. So to create an SFTP connection, you can create this connection for both cloud and on-premise for the SFTP servers running on cloud as well as on-premise. If you are using SFTP server on-premise, you would need to go through the cloud connector. Otherwise, you would just need the host name, the port and host key, and the root path, along with the credentials, authentication credentials. As you can see in the screenshot, this particular SFTP connection is enabled for both data flows and replication flows. For data flows, it can be used as a source, and for replication flows, it can be used as a target. Coming to the replication flow, so it supports for both load types, initial only and initial and delta. Once you configure the source connection, now you can configure the target connection. Here in this case, you can configure the SFTP as a target. So you can select the SFTP as a target, and you will need to select a container where to put the files on the SFTP server. Once you select the container, you have a similar options that what you currently see for the object store. All those options apply for the SFTP server, SFTP target as well. The option to adjust the replication thread limit, you can adjust the thread limit to control the throughput. Use the delta, group delta by to sort the delta updates by date or hour, and it supports multiple file formats. Parquet file is a default file format. It also supports the CSV, JSON, and JSON lines. And if you are using the file format Parquet file format, you can enable the Apache Spark compatibility. This will allow your time type columns to be stored in Int64, and you can select the file compression for the file optimization. And if you want to suppress the duplicates and avoid any duplicates in the targets, you can enable this option. And in case if you want to override the target settings at the object level, you can enable this option. So the business value for supporting this feature, now we have introduced a new replication target for the data distribution. Let me quickly walk you through a demo for this feature. As you can see from the connections, I'm not going to create a new connection. So I'm just going to show the existing connection that I already created for this demo. So as you can see, this connection is now enabled for the replication flow. For replication flow, it is enabled as a target. So if you're using cloud, you can just enter the host port and the host key and root path and the authentication type. If you are using on-premise, you would need to go through the cloud connector. And let me just show you within the replication flow. In the replication flow, I just want to select any source connection for this demo. I'm just using MS SQL as a source. And I'm using a DBO as my container, and add an object within the DBO. So as you can see in the settings, it supports both load types, initial only and initial and delta. And this is the target connection where you would need to create a connection to the SFTP server. So here you would select SFTP, the connection that we just created, and select a container to put the files. So in this case, I would just use an existing container, the test. So all the target options, target settings that currently supported for object store is also supported for the SFTP target. So I already discussed about these different target options. You can select these target options and save it. So I already created a ref flow and executed this. I will show you directly that to save some time. So this is the SFTP target that I create, SFTP replication flow that I created. And it is writing to this SFTP server. And this is the file that is creating under the container test. And I've already executed this. So this replication flow SFTP is the replication flow that I created for the SFTP as a target. And it completed successfully. Yeah. So I have only 2 records just for the demo. So both records has been written to the SFTP server.
The next one is, I'm sure it's going to raise a lot of eyebrows, and also a lot of you were waiting for this. But before I start, I would like to tell you that this is the fundamental or the foundation that we are trying to lay here for more enhancements for on capacity units dashboard in the future. But the first one is kind of an MVP to make sure that customers have a way to transparently look at the capacity units consumption. Now, what was happening so far was that there is a configuration tab in Datasphere, and that configuration tab tells you what is the configuration of your tenant, but it does not tell you how you have used your consumption units. In the cards that we have, it will always give you an indication of how many capacity units have you used. But customers usually have a question as to how did I reach this figure? Which of my uh, services did use what consumption units. And I would like to know more about it, maybe on a daily basis. I would like to know more about it from a replication perspective as to what was the POI, what were the POI objects that were actually consuming my capacity units, all sorts of questions. Now we are trying to answer that, or at least a subset of that, with the new capacity units dashboard, where we allow you to track the capacity unit consumption on daily and a monthly basis. So you can always see a breakdown of what was the consumption in a particular day and how did it actually go on throughout the month. In addition to that, we also tell you, even though it's not there in the screenshot that you see or on the tenant that I would show, but there's another card that tells you what percentage of your monthly subscription have you already used. So this is a very good indication for someone as to understand what is the overall consumption for this month against my actual subscribed. Yes, this information is also available in the tenant configuration, but as you now see that this is more towards monitoring and trying to get a little bit in depth. Apart from that, we now have a download button where you can actually download the information based on a time range. And now this tells you beyond what you see on the screen here. What you see on the screen is just a breakdown, a daily breakdown of the consumption units. But when you download the Excel sheet, it will tell you the breakdown of each service. And in addition to that, if there are capacity units that are consumed by a certain object, it will also show you which objects have been consuming what capacity units. You'll also take a look at that. Right? The overall idea is to lay this foundation so that we can build on top of this, and just so that I clear out any questions that there might be. This does not give you a space level breakdown of consumption units. Whether that is there in the plans, long term, yes. But we don't have a roadmap item that is already committed. We would like to work towards it, but this is too early at least at the moment. But we wanted to give out an MVP that at least eases some pain because customers have to do a lot of to and fro with different tools to find this information out. Now, coming back to um, my tenant, I would first show you the tenant configuration. So you see here in the tenant configuration, what we see is the consumption and how many consumption units have we used in current month versus the last month, and what is the tenant configuration looking like. But but this does not tell you how did you actually reach 13,000, um, and how did you it reach 6,759 capacity units. And this is what customers wanted to understand. So that is why we have now built the capacity dashboard. So you see here in the monitoring subtab that you have the capacity units dashboard. Yes, it is pretty simple. It only has a couple of cards. I'm not sure why the second card does not show up, but there's supposed to be another card here. And then you see here as to what was the total consumption that was happening on that particular day, as to how did it actually reach this figure, right? Now, the obvious thing is that why is there a difference between the number that you see here and number in tenant configuration? It's because the sync happens not real time. So there's a job that runs in the background, and it will always keep the numbers updated after a certain point in time. The other thing is that you can also directly jump from here to system configuration or download the metrics as CSV, and then you can specify a particular time range, and then you can click on download. For sake of saving time, I've also downloaded this, and you would see here that this is a CSV that you get. Whenever there is nothing logged in here, then obviously it means that either it has not been logged or the information has not yet been synced. But otherwise, you would always see the consumed blocks and the consumed capacity units for a particular service. And then you would see here that there are these 4 services, rather, maybe 5 of them. No, 4 of them. Yes, that keep on repeating every hour. And then you get information about these every hour. And this is exactly how the chart is actually plotted. Now, in addition to these, let me scroll down, because here you have the premium outbound consumption that goes in addition to whatever recurring blocks that you see. Whenever there is POI consumption, it tells you which object name and which space name is it coming from, and how many capacity units or how many blocks has it actually consumed. This tenant is not too heavy on replication, so the numbers, I mean, there's a lot of decimal places here, but on a productive tenant, we would expect that this information is something that adds value. But the good thing is that you at least get a breakdown of each an object from every space. So either you can actually check in every space as to how long was it running, but also you can check as an administrator, come here and check what was the actual consumption. So this, as I just want to reiterate, is just a starting step. There's a long way to go for us to reach a point where we can give a space level breakdown. But in my opinion, this is the first step in that journey. Right? If there are any questions, I would answer them on the chat then.
Thank you, Amok. And now let's have a look forward on the next quarters, what we plan on delivering from a feature function perspective. If we look at Q3, what we already delivered beginning of July now is expanding of the crawling capabilities for the catalog towards BW for HANA systems. Further down, we plan a mass import function for existing glossaries, terms, KPIs, etc. you might have sitting in Excel sheets or other text formats for an import into and reusing that in with the catalog functionality. On the task chain side, we plan to offer a public API where you are able to trigger a task chain from the outside of Datasphere and also from within a task chain that will offer a capability where you're able to call REST APIs as a task in a task chain with a synchronous or asynchronous execution mode. Also, we're adding additional ports for success and error so that you have can add like if statements on success or error occasions to define what to do next. And from a usability perspective, we will enhance the editor itself that you can change the orientation mode from horizontal to vertical or vice versa. On the transformation flow side, we plan on introducing batch processing for the HANA runtime, as well as enhancing the lineage to column level lineage also for transformation flows. Also, beginning of July, we already delivered a new load type for delta loads only in replication flows, as well as SFTP as a source in replication flows. Remember, we also earlier talked about SFTP as a target in replication flow. Now this brings us full circle, right? As a target as well as a source. Further down in Q3, we plan on adding Signavio as a target capability for replication flows. If we look towards the modeling editors, so additional syntax validation in the SQL editor is already delivered beginning of July now in Q3. And also the DSC support for hierarchies with directories is already there. What we're planning further down is enabling transport capabilities for the object store spaces. So very interesting one there. And if we look at the modeling for analytic models, we also already delivered in the early wave of July the unit conversion as an additional conversion capability for analytic models. What we're planning is a secondary structure, like you might know it similarly from BW queries in the past. Derivation of variable values for restricted measures and filter variables, and also being able to allow restricted measures in your analytic models that restrict on a node of hierarchy. Further down in Q3, we're planning on adding additional business functions for analytic models, like with year-to-date, month-to-date kind of functionalities, and also enhance the model validation framework with additional checks on association, consistency, as well as unassigned nodes. So further down the year, already during the current year, we expanded data center coverage on Google Cloud Platform and Azure to a variety of data centers. There's more to come, second half now. And also on the catalog side, we plan on enhancing the metadata extraction capabilities also for replication flows and its metadata. Also enhancing Oracle as a source, additional source in replication flows, and then in 2026 adding Microsoft SQL Server as a target in replication flows. On the analytic model side, we plan on enhancing the time dimension to be able to offer a fiscal time dimension or fiscal calendar capability. Sharing of analytical models is planned for Q4, including its contributing entities, etc. And if we look into 2026 further, there are variety of things what we're planning. This is just a limited set on what I picked here with the cloud connector for cloud data stores, support catalog crawling expansions towards HANA Cloud, S4 HANA, as well as SAP ECC. REST API connectivity to be able to connect to Ariba and namespaces, etc. So you see a full pipeline of things of what we've planned the second half and beyond there. And with that, we already come to the end of our session today. And I want to take the opportunity to thank all our speakers, which we had, and for preparing the great content and presenting that to you. So thanks for being here with us today, and see you next time around. Thanks and bye-bye.